And in 47 thunderous seconds, the gavel cracked. Kavanaugh's voice snapped, and your unfit for justice hit Jasmine Crockett like a lightning strike. Live before 20 million Americans. Gasps erupted, cameras locked on her unflinching stare. What she did next could shake the Supreme Court forever. Are you ready to see it? Washington, D.C. woke up buzzing, the kind of restless energy you feel in your bones. Outside Capitol Hill, protesters lined the sidewalks. Justice for all signs clashed with Kavanaugh's name slashed in red, anger and hope colliding in the crisp air. News vans lined the block, satellite dishes aimed skyward. Reporters rehearsed urgent openings as crews fought for the best shot at the Capitol steps. Through the noise came Jasmine Crockett, navy suit sharp, hair pinned back just right, one hand clutching a leather notebook, the other swinging loose. Every step cut through the crowd like she owned the pavement. Then came the ripple. Brett Kavanaugh had arrived. This one's going to be different, a cameraman muttered, the air turning thick and electric before the storm. As the Capitol doors opened and Jasmine stepped inside, the outside noise faded. This wasn't just another hearing, it was the hearing. But could anyone have predicted the words that would make the room freeze? The chamber doors closed behind her, shutting out the chants from outside. Inside, the silence felt heavier, like everyone was holding their breath. Jasmine scanned the room, mapping every face as if she were stepping onto a battlefield. Her eyes found Jamie Raskin. He gave a small, steady nod. The kind you give when words aren't needed. Jamie had taught her that a single, well-placed fact could hit harder than 100 angry speeches. 2 seats over, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez leaned back in her chair, arms folded, a half-smile playing at her lips. AOC was the kind of ally who waited for the perfect opening, and when she struck, it was clean, fast, and unforgettable. Across the aisle, the other side looked far too relaxed. Chuck Grassley sat with his hands folded neatly, wearing the calm confidence of a man certain of the ending. Jim Jordan leaned forward, elbows on the table, his smirk saying he was ready to watch Kavanaugh walk out untouched. A young staffer bent down beside Jasmine, voice barely above a whisper. Do you think they'll even listen? She didn't turn, eyes locked forward. Truth doesn't need to shout, she said quietly. It just needs to be heard. The gavel was only minutes away from striking, but the tension had already wrapped around the room. Cameras shifted, microphones tilted closer, waiting for the first spark. Sabr, but what happens when the truth gets drowned out by power? The chairman's gavel came down with a sharp crack, and the hum of quiet conversations died instantly. Every head turned toward the long table where Brett Kavanaugh sat, flanked by advisors and thick stacks of neatly arranged papers. The room leaned in. Kavanaugh started speaking in that slow, measured way lawyers do when they want to sound above it all. His tone was calm, but the edges carried something colder. A faint curl of disdain as he referred to the day's session as political theater. Each word was polished, deliberate, meant to project control. Jasmine didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed locked on him, the pen in her hand gliding across the page in quick, tight strokes. She wasn't doodling. She was laying out her plan, piece by piece, waiting for her moment like a boxer studying the opponent's footwork. Now and then, he glanced in her direction, almost daring her to interrupt. She didn't. Instead, her jaw tightened, her focus sharpening with every dismissive phrase that left his mouth. Around her, allies shifted forward, sensing the same undercurrent she did. The gap in his armor. Someone, the gavel would pass to her soon enough, and when it did, she'd have one chance to crack through that lawyerly calm and make him feel the weight of every word he'd brushed aside. When her moment comes, will she land the first blow, or will the walls close in? The gavel passed to Jasmine, and the room seemed to tilt in her direction. She straightened in her chair, flipping open her notebook with a soft thud. Her voice was steady, the kind that doesn't need to rise to command attention. Justice Kavanaugh, she began, let's talk about a few financial matters that haven't been disclosed. Kavanaugh's eyes narrowed, but his tone stayed even. I've complied with all legal requirements, he said, words rolling out like rehearsed lines. He leaned back slightly, as if the question itself was beneath him. Jasmine didn't blink. Then perhaps you can help me understand these. She slid forward a folder, photos clipped neatly inside. Private jets, oceanfront villas, smiling handshakes with wealthy donors. These were trips, weren't they? Paid for by individuals with cases before the court? He shifted just enough for the cameras to catch it. I don't recall the details, he said, the faintest crack in his voice. Her pen tapped the table once. You don't recall the details, but you were there, correct? Each question pinned him tighter, forcing short, reluctant answers. The gallery leaned in, sensing the pressure build. With every exchange, his lawyerly calm frayed a little more. She stayed composed, stacking each piece of evidence like bricks in a wall he couldn't climb over. The air in the chamber thickened. Even her opponents watched closely now, curious where this was heading. She paused just long enough for silence to fill the space between them. So, Justice Kavanaugh, is this the crack in the armor or just the bait for a trap? Kavanaugh leaned in, the chair creaking under the shift of his weight. His voice came out sharper now, cutting across the chamber. Onashish, I will not entertain these baseless accusations, he said, each word clipped, his jaw tight. A low wave of murmurs rolled through the audience, bouncing off the high walls. The cameras moved in closer, lenses drinking in every twitch of his expression. Somewhere behind Jasmine, a cough broke the tension for half a second. Then silence settled again. On her side of the aisle, Jamie Raskin sat forward, eyes locked on Kavanaugh, his pen frozen mid-note. AOC crossed one leg over the other, her gaze darting between Jasmine and the justice, reading the shift in the air. Across from them, Chuck Grassley's lips curled faintly upward, and Jim Jordan smirked openly, like they'd just scored a point. Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned slightly toward the microphone, her tone calm but carrying an edge that cut clean. Then let's stick to facts, Justice Kavanaugh, she said, letting the words hang in the air just long enough. The moment stretched, taut as a wire. His eyes narrowed, and the faint rhythm of his fingers drumming on the table betrayed the calm mask he was trying to keep. She knew she'd hit something, not yet deep enough to break him, but close. And in that breath before the next question, the whole room seemed to be asking the same thing. When the facts cut deep, will the mask finally slip? Jasmine didn't go straight to her next question. She let the silence breathe, then leaned into the microphone, her voice dropping lower. Justice Kavanaugh, I want to tell you about someone back home. The room quieted instantly, the shift in her tone pulling every ear toward her. She spoke of an elderly veteran, 83 years old, a man who'd fought for his country and returned home believing in its promises. He'd built a small life, a modest house, nothing extravagant. But because of a ruling Kavanaugh supported, the man lost it all. He called my office the day he was evicted, Jasmine said, her voice steady but heavy, and he asked me one question: how is this justice? Kavanaugh's posture changed. His shoulders tightened, and he shifted in his chair, eyes fixed on the papers in front of him instead of on her. The cameras caught it, that subtle retreat, as if looking at her might make the story harder to ignore. She didn't stop. That man wore the uniform of this nation. Aha! He believed the courts would protect him, not strip away the roof over his head. Her words cut through the air like glass, each one deliberate, impossible to dodge. The gallery was silent now, and somewhere in the back, a single cough echoed like a crack in the stillness. Kavanaugh's pen tapped once against the desk, his face locked in neutral, but his jaw told another story. Jasmine's gaze stayed on him, unblinking. So tell me, Justice, will personal truth pierce institutional arrogance? Jasmine leaned forward, ready to press him harder. Justice Kavanaugh, based on your... She didn't finish. He cut her off, leaning toward the microphone, voice sharp and loaded. I don't need lectures from a rookie congresswoman. The words landed like a slap. Gasps broke out across the chamber, a few muffled but most loud enough to echo. Outside in the press trucks, news tickers lit up with the quote, the letters flashing red as if sirens were blaring. For half a second, Jasmine went still, pen frozen above the page, eyes locked on him. It wasn't hesitation, just the stillness before a storm. Something in the air shifted, and everyone in the room felt it. Kavanaugh leaned back, almost smug, as if he'd just regained control. Across the aisle, Jim Jordan smirked, while Chuck Grassley's expression barely changed, though his eyes gave away satisfaction. Jasmine's allies sat forward, sensing the moment teetering on the edge. The cameras zoomed in on her face, catching the faintest tightening of her jaw. She could answer in anger, let the heat take over, or she could choose something sharper, colder, far more dangerous. Every second felt like it was stretching into minutes. The tension in the chamber wasn't just between two people anymore. It was between power and defiance, tradition and change. She finally set her pen down, her fingers calm, her gaze unwavering. And in that suspended moment, the question seemed to hang in the air for everyone watching. Will she respond with fire or with steel? Jasmine didn't take the bait. She leaned back, letting silence hang for the cameras. Then in a voice sharp as glass, Article 30 grants you life tenure, Justice Kavanaugh, not life without accountability. The words landed clean, no anger, just precision. She opened her notebook and flipped a page with deliberate care. Canon 2 of the Judicial Code of Conduct requires that a judge avoid even the appearance of impropriety. Not just impropriety itself, the appearance. Her gaze never left him, like she was reading the words directly into his conscience. Across the table, Jamie Raskin gave the faintest nod, a quiet acknowledgement of the shot she just landed. AOC's lips curved into the kind of smile that said, "That's how it's done." On the other side, Grassley's eyes shifted down to his papers, while Jim Jordan's smirk faltered just enough for the cameras to notice. Kavanaugh's own smile didn't survive the next line. When citizens see a justice accepting gifts from those with business before the court, they question the system. And when the system loses the trust of the people, Justice, it loses its power. The crowd in the hearing room leaned forward in unison, the way people do when they can sense a turning point. Phones lit up in the gallery as tweets flew, hashtags forming before the words even finished leaving her mouth. Jasmine paused just long enough for the weight of it all to settle. Kavanaugh's hands were still, his eyes fixed on her now, the easy confidence from minutes ago gone. Is the tide turning, or is the storm just beginning? Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She leaned forward, eyes locked on Kavanaugh, and spoke as if the rest of the room didn't exist. You remember the veteran I mentioned earlier? Her tone softened, but every word carried weight. He fought for a country that promised justice, she said slowly, letting the sentence hang. But justice didn't fight for him. The line cut through the chamber like a blade, stripping away the legal jargon and political theater until only the truth remained. Silence swept in, thick and unbroken, and the shuffling of papers stopped. Even Grassley's eyes lowered to the table, and Jim Jordan shifted in his seat, suddenly finding something fascinating in the grain of the wood. Kavanaugh didn't look up. His hands tightened on the edges of his notes, knuckles paling, as if gripping them hard enough might anchor him. The cameras caught the stillness, the kind of stillness that says more than words ever could. Jasmine didn't rush. She let the quiet work for her, let the weight of that story settle on everyone in the room. That man believed the courts would protect him, she continued, voice barely above a whisper. And instead, the court you sit on took everything he had left. In the gallery, someone inhaled sharply, the sound loud in the absence of any other noise. Phones stayed lowered now. No one wanted to miss a word. She held his gaze, or tried to. He never met her eyes. And in that moment, it was clear to everyone watching, both here and across the country. When silence speaks louder than defense, who's really winning? Silence was still hanging in the air when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez leaned forward, her voice cutting through like a sudden chord. Justice Kavanaugh, the precedent is clear. Caperton versus A.T. Massey Cole Combe. Even the appearance of bias undermines public trust. Her tone was crisp, not angry, just deadly precise. Jamie Raskin followed without missing a beat, sliding a case file across the table. And in Lilleberg versus Health Services Acquisition Corp., the court ruled that perception alone was enough to vacate a judgment. That's not opinion, Justice. That's law. His delivery was calm, but it hit like a hammer driving nails. Kavanaugh shifted in his seat, the lawyer's polish returning to his voice. He tried to frame the discussion back to process and technicalities, talking about context and judicial discretion. But the shift in the room was already happening. The current was against him now. In the public gallery, a low murmur rose, the kind that comes when people realize they're watching the tables turn. Reporters hunched over laptops, fingers flying, some glancing up every few seconds to catch another line worth publishing. Jasmine sat back for the moment, letting her allies press the advantage. Each citation from AOC and Raskin tightened the frame around him, leaving less room to maneuver. His replies grew shorter, less certain, the pauses between them longer. It was no longer one voice against him, it was a chorus. And each note was hitting the same truth. Can collective truth overpower entrenched power? Jasmine leaned forward again, her fingers brushing over a single sheet of paper as if it were the sharpest weapon in the room. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Justice Kavanaugh, she began, sliding the page across the table. This is a timeline of communications between your office and Mr. Harold Whitmore, a political donor with active interest before the court. The first murmur came from the gallery, quick and hushed. She didn't pause. This call, March 14th. This email, April 2nd. And here, the private dinner, April 9th, 3 days before a ruling that directly benefited him. Her words were clipped, precise, each date falling like the tick of a countdown clock. Kavanaugh's jaw tightened, the muscle working beneath the skin. His eyes flicked to the paper but didn't linger, as if looking too long would concede something. He started, but the sound was swallowed by the collective gasp that swept through the room. Reporters stopped typing mid-sentence, heads snapping up. Cameras zoomed in so close you could see the fine tremor in his hands as he adjusted his pen. Across the aisle, even Grassley's expression flattened into something unreadable. Jasmine let the silence stretch just long enough for the tension to peak. Then she leaned back, her voice still calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. So, Justice, would you like to explain this timeline, or should we let the public draw their own conclusions? The air in the chamber felt heavier now, as if everyone knew they had just crossed into territory that couldn't be walked back. Has the final card just been played? The gavel struck for the final time, and the hearing was over, at least on paper. Jasmine gathered her notes without hurry, the weight of the morning still humming in the air. Across the table, Kavanaugh avoided her gaze, already leaning toward his aides. When she stepped outside, the noise hit like a wave. A wall of voices chanting her name rose from the barricades, loud enough to drown out the press microphones shoved in her direction. Some waved handmade signs with her face sketched in bold strokes. Others simply held their phones high, capturing the moment. In newsrooms across the country, the clips were already climbing into the millions. One headline read, "Crockett confronts Kavanaugh," the moment that stopped the room. Another called it, "The hearing heard round the nation." Hashtags spread like wildfire, and talk radio lit up with callers demanding judicial accountability. From the Capitol steps, Jasmine didn't address the crowd right away. She just stood there for a beat, scanning the sea of faces, the mix of strangers bound by the same electricity that had charged the chamber minutes earlier. She knew cameras were still rolling, but in that moment it felt bigger than them. The chants grew louder, the applause sharper, until it became impossible to tell where one voice ended and another began. It was more than support, it was a verdict of its own. Security, but will public outcry lead to real change? The door to her office clicked shut, sealing out the roar from the steps below. The quiet felt almost foreign after the hours of lights, cameras, and the relentless press of eyes. Jasmine dropped her notebook on the desk and sank into the chair, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Jamie Raskin stepped in first, a tired smile on his face. "You landed every shot," he said, the kind of praise that carried weight coming from him. Al and AOC followed, tossing her blazer over a chair. "They won't forget that in there," she added, her voice half admiring, half wary. Jasmine shook her head, brushing it off. "It's not about me," she said quietly. "It's about the people who can't walk into that room and speak for themselves." She leaned back, eyes closing for a second, as if replaying every face she'd been fighting for today. In the corner, her phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls, messages, media requests stacking up. She ignored it. For a brief moment, the room was just four walls, a desk, and the faint smell of coffee gone cold. Her allies knew the battle wasn't over, but today had been a victory all the same. Still, victories in Washington always come with a price, and somewhere deep down, Jasmine understood hers might not be small. But what's the cost of speaking truth to power? Outside her office, the story had already slipped the bounds of Capitol Hill. Across the country, people were uploading their own videos, shaky phone footage of evictions, scanned letters from court decisions that had gutted their savings, tearful accounts of being crushed under a system that never seemed to listen. Hero, the hashtags tied to Jasmine's name weren't just trending, they were multiplying. Clips of her confrontation with Kavanaugh, looped endlessly, spliced with testimonies from citizens who saw themselves in that hearing room. A single sentence, "Justice didn't fight for him," had taken on a life of its own, printed on posters, blasted across timelines, repeated on late-night radio. From small-town diners to crowded city buses, people were talking about judicial reform, not as a lofty policy goal, but as something personal. In coffee shops, strangers debated the ethics of power. In veterans' halls, old men nodded at her words as if she'd spoken for them directly. Jasmine didn't go looking for the spotlight, but it found her anyway. And now the question wasn't whether people had heard her, it was whether they were ready to act. Can one moment spark a movement? The press room was packed shoulder to shoulder, cameras stacked in rows, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. Jasmine stepped up to the podium, the murmur of reporters fading into a heavy silence. She didn't look down at her notes. She didn't need to. "Justice is not a privilege for the powerful," she began, her voice steady, each word landing with deliberate force. "It's a promise to the people." She let the sentence breathe, scanning the room, making sure it reached every corner. She spoke of trust, of responsibility, of the duty to guard the rights of those who could not stand in these rooms themselves. She didn't name Kavanaugh, but his shadow hung over every word. The reporters typed furiously, but for once, no one interrupted with a question. Somewhere hundreds of miles away, in a dimly lit living room, the elderly veteran sat alone in front of his TV. His hands rested on his knees, eyes fixed on the screen. When she finished, he nodded once, slow, deliberate, as if to say, "That's what I fought for." Back in the press room, Jasmine stepped away from the podium, but not before leaving them with one last call. If you believe justice should serve all, share this story, because silence is the enemy of change. The room erupted in the chaos of questions, but her words were already out in the world, moving faster than any headline could catch. If this story struck a chord with you, don't just let it pass. Like, share, and let others feel the weight of this moment, because truth only lives when it's carried forward. Your thoughts matter. Your voice matters. Drop a comment and tell us which part made you stop, feel, or even get angry. And remember, when we speak together, silence has no power. This dramatized story is inspired by real struggles and real people. All characters and dialogue are fictionalized for commentary and education. It is not intended to defame or mislead, but to inspire reflection and civic awareness. Thanks for watching.